Tsavo East, late morning. A single elephant stepped from the thinning acacia, her left hind leg dragging slightly behind her. The soil beneath her feet cracked and shifted with each uneven step. Her body was large but lean, the sharp ridges of her spine visible beneath dust-caked skin. She did not pause to scan the open land. She walked straight, as if the direction had already been chosen long ago. Behind her, no herd followed, no calf, no sound of other movement. Only the faint rattle of cicadas and the brush swaying dry in the heat. Her ears remained still against her neck, not fanning for relief or listening for calls. Along her shoulder, a single line of dried blood marked the skin, almost the shade of the red dust rising under her steps. Her trunk hung low but did not drag. It lifted every few paces, hovering in the air, uncertain whether it sought scent, support, or memory. Flies clung to the wounded leg where the skin had thickened and cracked from swelling. Each movement forced a wince through her lower frame, a shifting of weight, a trembling just under the ribs. But she did not stop. Further downslope, a water channel lay half dry, carved deep into the clay by rains that had not returned for weeks. She reached it and paused. Her head tilted slightly forward and her breath came long and slow. She did not drink. Instead, she turned along the edge and began following the trench, as if the path it carved might eventually lead somewhere safer. From the ridgeline above, the outpost station roof shimmered against the heat, barely visible through the rising air. Her direction remained steady. Every step leaned forward like a decision already made. 3 kilometers behind her, no spoor crossed the land. No distant trumpets. No evidence of where she had come from or who she might have left. The acacia line held no answers. Her ears twitched once, briefly, then stilled. In the quiet, a low groan slipped from her trunk. Not a cry, not a call, just a breath with weight in it. She continued. Closer to the base station fence, a patrol drone had logged movement but marked no danger. Elephants were not uncommon here, though most kept to the deeper flats or further grazing routes, but this one did not graze. Her mouth remained dry, her pace unbroken. A patch of skin beneath her right eye looked raw, not freshly torn but rubbed enough that it caught the light. Her gait had worsened. The dragging leg had started to stiffen further. And now each placement came with a longer pause before the next. She stopped once, just for a moment, and shifted her head toward the breeze. Her trunk lifted, not in alarm, but as if catching something faint. There was no sound, only the soft rustle of open grassland. And still, she moved again, crossing the last small rise that separated the station from the open range. She was close now. If she lay down, she might not get back up. If she turned back, there would be nothing behind her but heat and the unknown. Every step forward meant survival. Every minute she kept standing meant hope, however fragile. Her direction, slow as it was, held no panic, only resolve. By the time she reached the last stretch before the fence post, her breathing had grown audible, long and uneven. Her trunk dipped toward the earth. Then she lifted it again. From the observation tower, a lone ranger had just begun to step outside. He hadn't seen her yet, but she had already seen him, and she kept walking. The dry wind moved across the outer edge of Tsavo's boundary, flattening the brittle grass near the southern watch line. Joel stood with his hand resting lightly on the rusted top rail of the outer fence, his eyes following nothing in particular. It had been nearly a month since he returned to the reserve. He hadn't spoken much since. Most days he took the early shift, silent hours, open sky, no questions. He was not ready for people. But the land didn't ask. The land just waited. A faint crack from the west broke the quiet. Then another. Not loud, not urgent, just the kind of distant sound that comes when something heavy moves through dry brush. Joel didn't flinch. Elephants were always possible, though they rarely approached the human fence. Still, something made him turn, slow, cautious, and lift his eyes across the ridge. She was already halfway down the slope. Her steps were uneven. The moment he saw the hind leg falter, he straightened. The elephant was coming toward the station directly, not grazing, not wandering. There was no hesitation in her line, just a long, tired, forward pull. Like every part of her had already decided this was the only direction left. Joel stepped away from the fence and started down the incline behind the field cabin. He kept his body relaxed, his shoulders low. As he reached the edge of the open patch that separated brush from fence line, she entered the clearing. Dust lifted in faint clouds around her feet. Her trunk rose slightly, hovered, then fell. Her ears did not lift. Her head stayed low. She was larger than most lone cows he'd seen. Not young, not old. Her right flank bore a dark patch near the shoulder. Dried blood, likely rubbed clean in parts by passing against trees. The leg was worse up close. Swollen from joint to foot, the skin tight and hot-looking. She dragged it, but her posture never broke. Each step placed with quiet resolve. Her eyes held no panic, just exhaustion. Joel took another step forward, his boots pressed into the soil with care. She stopped, 20 meters between them now. He didn't speak at first, just watched. Her breath came heavier now. Her chest moved wide and slow. Her trunk lifted again, and this time pointed slightly toward him. She didn't wave it or sniff. She only held it there, suspended, trembling. Joel finally whispered, not out of need but instinct, "It's okay, girl." She didn't react, didn't turn, didn't move away. Her body swayed once, a faint motion against the pull of her own weight, and then steadied again. There was no herd in sight, no second set of footprints. If she had come far, she had done it alone. Joel knew enough to recognize what was at stake. If the leg worsened, she would not be able to forage or walk back. If infection had already spread deeper, time was narrowing fast. If she lay down, they might not be able to move her at all. Every minute upright mattered. Every bit of her remaining strength had to be preserved, not spent. He took a slow step back, never turning his face. Then another. She watched him but didn't follow. Instead, she dropped her trunk again and stood perfectly still as if holding her place in the dust. Joel moved quietly up the slope toward the shed, reaching for the old field radio. His voice was calm, barely more than a breath. "Need assistance. One lone cow. Injured. Approaching station on her own." He paused, looked back once. She hadn't moved. The heat shimmered between them. Around her, the silence was full. No cries, no calls, just the sound of breath and the steadiness of something that had endured too much and chosen to keep going anyway. Joel moved slowly from the edge of the shed, a half-filled water pail in one hand, the other kept loosely at his side. The woman at the DeSavo post had responded to his call, promised someone would be en route, but even she had paused when he said the elephant had approached on her own. That kind of behavior was rare. Injured elephants don't seek people, not unless something in them has already surrendered the rest. Now Joel stepped lightly over the dust-flattened grass, the sun on his back, and tried not to make anything feel like pursuit. The elephant had stopped less than 10 meters from the outer boundary. She had not advanced past the water line. Her body remained still, but the trembling had grown more visible in her legs. Her left flank shifted once, then steadied. Her head lowered slightly, not as a bow, but as a matter of weight. Her right eye was closed, the skin around it dark and swollen. The kind of swelling that came from repeated trauma or pressure, not a single wound. Whatever had happened, it hadn't been quick. Her trunk remained down, not extended, not raised, not searching. It rested gently above the ground. Its tip curled slightly inward. That posture, not aggressive, not fearful, was something Joel had only seen once before. years ago, when a bull had collapsed from exhaustion and lay motionless while rangers approached. The same stillness, the same silent allowance. Joel crouched a few paces from her and set the pail down, letting the water settle before backing away. She didn't reach for it. Her trunk didn't move, but her breathing changed. Deeper now, more strained. She shifted her weight, tried to adjust her stance, but the injured leg refused. The effort caused her to sway, then freeze. She didn't fall, but the effort had cost her. If she dropped to her side now, recovery would become almost impossible. An elephant that cannot rise often does not survive. The heat pressed heavier across the clearing. Joel took a slow step forward and whispered, "You're almost there." She didn't respond, but she did not retreat either. He knelt in the dust, watching. There was something in her stillness that felt less like fear and more like asking. Not for rescue, not even for relief, just for space. A place to stop where the danger was less. It was not common. It was not what they trained for, but it was clear. He reached behind and tapped the radio once. "She's not moving. Still upright, eyes shut, breathing's labored. I think she came to stop." There was a pause, then static, then a reply. "ETA 23 minutes. Keep her standing if you can." That was the only instruction, but it held everything. If she remained standing, they could administer antibiotics, fluid drips, begin cooling. If she dropped, all of that would change. Even a treatment window as short as 10 minutes could make the difference. Her tremors were worsening, small shakes beneath her ribs, almost invisible if one didn't look close. Joel could see the fatigue cresting over her. He rose and took 3 slow steps toward her, close enough that the heat from her body was perceptible in the air. She still didn't move. Only her ear lifted slightly, not in alarm, but as if registering the nearness. Then it fell again. Joel knelt. He didn't reach out. He just sat, facing her, letting her know she wasn't alone. Minutes passed like that. Wind stirred dust against the base of the fence. Somewhere in the distance, a crested crane called once, then fell silent. The elephant made no sound, but beneath her closed eye a line of moisture had begun to gather, carving a slow path through the dust on her skin. She did not ask for help. She did not flee. She stood still, trembling, holding every breath as if it might be the one that determined what happened next. Joel returned with a second pail, this time bringing it closer than before. He stopped 5 meters out, letting the dust settle before crouching low. The elephant hadn't moved. She remained in place, weight evenly distributed now, but her posture said everything, holding herself still against whatever was rising underneath. The tremor in her side had slowed but hadn't stopped. Her trunk, once limp, now lifted just enough to hover over the ground, brushing the soil as if checking that it still held her. The first pail remained untouched. Joel pushed the second forward across the dirt, then eased himself down onto one knee. There was no need to speak this time. Her ears stayed low, unmoved by his presence, but he saw something new in the curve of her shoulder, a dark, dried streak that ran from the top of her flank to just above the rib line. Not a clean wound, a scrape, possibly from a tusk or from forcing her way between trees. Closer to her head, just beneath the right ear, there was swelling, dark and fresh. It wasn't just one injury. She had likely been hit hard more than once. Joel scanned the horizon briefly. Still no movement, no herd. If she had been driven out, it may not have been by choice. Some bulls push sick or wounded cows away. Sometimes old hierarchy instincts override the basic bond. And if she'd collapsed alone out there, no one would have known. She had chosen this direction. She had walked all this way not because she knew help would come, but perhaps because there was nothing left to walk toward. She shifted slightly, moving her uninjured foot a few centimeters to the side. The motion brought her closer to the water, but her trunk didn't dip. Joel watched her eyes. Only one remained open, the left. The other remained swollen shut. But even with half her vision gone, she made no defensive movement. No sign of fear. She simply stood. He stepped once more toward her, this time placing the pail with both hands just beneath where her trunk now hung. The water inside caught the light, small ripples forming as dust settled on its surface. Still, she didn't reach for it. Instead, she lowered her head. Not fully, just enough to suggest something was easing inside her. Her shoulder dropped slightly, the heavy muscles shifting as though releasing some unseen burden. Joel took a slow breath. He knew this could turn. Exhaustion often disguised instability. If her legs gave out, it would happen fast. If she collapsed before treatment, the weight of her own body could crush the internal bruising. If she fell without control, her head could hit stone. They had minutes, maybe less. But she was still standing. Joel looked again at the bruises near her ear, the torn skin, the old dried streaks. She had walked with this pain for a long distance, alone, injured, nearly blind. Each step had been a choice against collapse. And still, she had come here. Not to beg, not to submit, but to rest somewhere where harm might not follow. She shifted again, and this time her trunk moved. Not far, just a small reach toward the rim of the water pail. The tip touched the edge but did not drink. She let it rest there. Joel stayed still. One touch was enough for now. A sign of presence, of possibility. He eased himself back, letting her regain space. The sun was beginning to drop just a few degrees lower, casting the light more softly across her skin. It turned the dust on her back pale, like the underside of old bark. Wind pressed gently through the grass behind the fence, the sound quiet and constant. She remained still, her trunk resting against the pail, her body no longer swaying. And for the first time, her chest lifted with a deeper breath, one that did not tremble on the way out. The first vehicle arrived just past the narrow curve of the salt trail, its tires pressing deep into the cracked earth as the dust rose behind it. A second followed minutes later, slower, carrying the field vet and an auxiliary team. Joel didn't move from where he sat. Cross-legged in the shaded edge of the post, the elephant remained upright. Her trunk had dipped once toward the water again, this time drinking. Slow sips, spaced by long pauses. She didn't acknowledge the vehicles. She didn't need to. Her body language made everything clear. She had no strength left for flight and no reason left for defense. The vet stepped down from the passenger side, boots crunching the grit with careful weight. She gave a nod to Joel but didn't speak. Her attention remained on the animal, reading posture, breath rate, gait. The tremor had returned, subtle now, running beneath the skin like wind passing through reeds. Still, the elephant stood. A ranger from the tracking team moved to the side, raising binoculars instinctively to scan the ridge behind the post. There was a pause. Then his voice came low, more to himself than anyone nearby. No tracks behind her. They checked the ground again. No fresh spoor, no signs of others traveling with her, no parallel movements across the basin. Joel stood then and walked slowly to the edge of the scrub line. His gaze traced the path she had come down hours before. It was empty now, still in the heat. The silence felt too wide. Then, from the western ridge, distant, faint but unmistakable, came a low trumpet. Not a call of alarm, not even of greeting. Just a single, long-held sound, carried by the wind and quickly gone. The team froze. The vet straightened. Joel turned toward the slope, and there they were. Just at the edge of the grasslands, barely visible where the land broke into scattered acacia, stood a line of shapes, gray against gold, unmoving. A herd, still and silent, holding formation as if waiting for a signal that had not yet come. They didn't advance, they didn't retreat, they only stood. 11 elephants, cows, juveniles, one large bull at the rear, all positioned just far enough to see but not be seen too clearly. It was unusual. Herds don't wait this way, not without reason. The vet said nothing, but her eyes flicked between the injured elephant and the ridge. There was a connection here, but no pattern they could name. Perhaps they had followed her part of the way. Perhaps they had let her go. Perhaps she had fallen behind, and they had chosen the edge as far as they would go. Herd dynamics were often predictable, but not always. Joel stepped forward once, then stopped. The injured elephant had heard it too. Her ears lifted slightly, not in full alert, but in awareness. Her trunk raised just above the ground, hung there. No sound came from her, no reply. But her body leaned forward an inch, like something inside had turned toward the sound, even if she could not follow. The vet approached slowly then, prepping the first injection. A basic anti-inflammatory to begin easing pressure in the leg. It wouldn't fix the injury, but it would buy time. Time for hydration, for scans, for a decision. Joel stayed near the shoulder, whispering only once. Easy now. She didn't move when the needle touched skin, just shifted weight slightly. Her body didn't resist. It was the first intervention, the first crossing of space between human and elephant that was met without hesitation. If she had feared them, it no longer showed. Above the ridge, the herd still hadn't moved. They remained like stone under the flattening sky, no sound, no motion, just presence, witness. The sun had begun to lower, casting long shadows across the station clearing. The dust swirled low in the wind, and the leaves in the brush shifted softly. In that hour, nothing rushed, nothing broke the quiet. One elephant stood. 11 waited, and in between them the space stayed open. As the light softened across the clearing, the vet worked in quiet concentration beside the elephant's flank. Joel stood nearby, steadying the water canister as the assistant prepped gauze and gloves. The sedative hadn't been used. Her stillness made it unnecessary. She didn't resist the examination, didn't turn or flinch. Her body, though strained, allowed every touch like it had long since run out of defense. The swelling on her leg had worsened, wrapping up past the joint where movement tightened and pulsed beneath the skin. When the vet reached gently behind the ear, she paused. Just beneath the surface there were ridges, bruises forming under the thick hide, warm to the touch. Her fingers traced a shallow depression along the upper shoulder blade and found the first puncture. A round, deep wound, barely scabbed, hidden by folds of dust-matted skin. A second lay just behind it, and a third near the spine. Each had closed just enough to blend into shadow. But they were there. It wasn't the pattern of random injury. The spacing suggested precision. A bull, most likely. A territorial strike, perhaps during a water confrontation or mating competition. But there was a chance it hadn't come from another elephant at all. Some poaching methods use sharpened rods, silent and fast. Either way, the damage had gone deep. The vet stood and looked out across the rise. She walked on this for days, she said quietly. Joel didn't answer. He didn't need to. They'd already traced her tracks from the ridge, just over 11.8 kilometers, through dry bush, open plain, and thorny undergrowth, all while managing 3 internal wounds, a swollen leg, and partial blindness. The effort itself had likely worsened the swelling, but without movement she would have died where she stood. The heat alone would have closed her lungs. If she had stayed down after the first day, the scavengers would have come. They cleaned the largest puncture first. The vet worked quickly but with care, her hands pressing into the space where skin folded and resisted. The elephant didn't move. Her breath slowed at moments but was never held. She was present, grounded and still. Joel watched her eye, the one still open. It didn't blink much, but the occasional long close of the lid revealed how thin her reserves had become. This was no longer about pain management. It was about endurance, whether her body could hold out long enough for the swelling to ease and for movement to return. If infection set in, they'd lose that window. If she dropped under strain, getting her back up would become nearly impossible. Every hour counted now. Every small decision had a consequence. She chose to walk toward people, the vet said, her tone more fact than reflection. That's not instinct. That's experience. Joel nodded. They'd seen it before in older elephants, those who had witnessed interventions, who had watched companions treated. There was a kind of memory in their migration, not human memory, but something real, something shaped by exposure, pain, and survival. It wasn't a plea. It was a choice. The final rinse passed over the wound, and the vet stepped back. Antibiotics had been administered, and swelling was managed for now. She would be monitored through the night. Movement was discouraged. Hydration was essential. The team would stay with her until the sun rose again. The herd on the ridge remained still, unmoved by time. The light now stretched across the field in long, amber bands, catching the fine hairs along the elephant's flank. She hadn't taken a step since her arrival. But she hadn't fallen either. In the hush of the hour, the wind passed low through the dry leaves, and the only sound was breath. Still steady, still alive. The wind shifted just before dawn. A cooler breath passed over the clearing, brushing through the low brush and lifting the soft edge of dust that had settled in the night. The camp had gone quiet after midnight. Even the generators had paused, leaving only the rhythm of breath, deep, slow inhales from the elephant, and quieter ones from the humans waiting nearby. They had taken turns resting, but Joel had remained closest. Not out of duty, just something closer to presence. He didn't watch her the entire time, but he never moved far. The elephant hadn't slept in the traditional sense. She had dozed in intervals, her eyelid drifting closed, her weight shifting subtly from one side to the other. The swelling had begun to ease just slightly around the shoulder, where the compresses had drawn down the heat. The fluid drip had been removed 3 hours earlier. She had stood without it since. At 5:17 a.m., she moved. Not much, just the front right leg, sliding half a foot forward, then pausing. The shift in her stance broke the pattern of stillness, and Joel noticed immediately. He didn't rise. He just turned toward her, keeping his body relaxed. The elephant let out a long, low exhale, a soft, gravelly breath that vibrated through the soil near her feet. She moved the other front leg next, this time with more weight behind it. She didn't limp the way she had before. The pain was still there, clearly, but something in the distribution of weight had changed. She had rested long enough, taken in enough water, and tolerated the discomfort long enough to test movement again. The moment felt like nothing and everything all at once. Because if she could walk, she could recover, and if she could recover, she could return. There was risk in it. If her weight collapsed again too soon, the strain could cause internal bleeding. If the bruising around the ribs hadn't stabilized, forward movement could reverse every gain they'd made. But she moved again. Joel stood now, slowly, allowing her to register his posture. Her trunk lifted, not in warning, not in display, but loosely, softly, and without aim. Then it dropped again. Her eyes settled on him for a long moment. She took a half step forward, then another. He didn't move. He only lowered his gaze and took one step back, offering space. She followed. Her pace was uneven, but it held. 3 meters closed between them, slow and heavy with the weight of caution. When she stopped again, Joel remained exactly where he was. His arms hung loosely by his sides, palms facing slightly forward, exposed. The elephant reached her trunk forward. Not in curiosity, not in search. Just forward. It hovered in front of him, a breath away from his chest. Then the tip made contact, light, careful, brief. It wasn't a gesture of affection. It wasn't a thank you. It was a touch of recognition, of coexistence. She had come this far alone, but not entirely. Not anymore. Joel bowed his head, not deep, not deliberate, just a slight folding forward of his neck, letting her remain the taller of the two. The contact lasted only a few seconds. Then her trunk fell again, swaying once as it dropped. Behind her, the first light of morning broke across the ridge. The sun rose without sound, casting pale orange across the spine of the hills. The herd had not moved in hours, but now 2 of the younger elephants stepped from the line, then 3 more. The rest followed, slow and quiet. No trumpets. No display, just movement. She turned. Her gait was measured, not forced. Her back legs still dragged slightly, but not in collapse. As she began walking toward the slope, the gap between her and the others began to close. Joel didn't follow. He stood alone by the fence line, hands loose, eyes forward. The elephants reached the rise in silence. One paused beside her as they met, just long enough to match stride. Then they disappeared together into the open grass, swallowed by morning light and moving wind. The field remained behind them, empty now, except for footprints in soft dust and a faint scent of rain carried by the shifting air. The morning light reached low across the basin, stretching thin gold across the red earth and washing the land in a color too soft to hold. It had been nearly 2 hours since she last moved. The vet had cleared her for release if she chose to leave, though no one pushed for it. Joel remained by the west post with his hand resting lightly on the wood rail, not watching her directly anymore, but always aware of where she stood. The tension of the last day had lifted only slightly, enough to breathe, but not enough to look away. She shifted her weight again. The rear leg dragged, but the swelling had reduced enough to bend. The pressure bandage held. Her ribs still expanded slowly when she breathed, and her eye had opened partway through the night, cloudy but no longer crusted shut. Small details, signs of survival, but nothing was certain. Not yet. Her ears flicked once toward the ridge. The sound had not been loud, just a shuffle, grass parting, earth giving. She turned her head toward it and then moved. First her front foot, then the second. It wasn't a full stride. It was more like a commitment. She was going. Joel didn't speak. No one did. The other rangers stood back from the path she began to take, clearing space without ceremony. Her pace was slower than before, but more fluid. She stopped once, just to steady herself, then continued. Her trunk lifted briefly, not to search, not to signal, but to feel the shift in the air. The direction was certain now. She was not circling, she was returning. As she climbed the slope, dust began to rise beneath her steps. Fine grains kicked up with each shift of her good leg. The herd stood just beyond the ridge where the shadow of the tallest acacia leaned into the basin. They had remained in place all night, never approaching, never retreating. Now they began to move. One by one they emerged from the tall grass. Not in formation, not as a wall, but as individuals converging around her. The eldest cow stepped first, her movements wide and slow. A calf followed, brushing its flank against the side of the lead female. 2 juveniles came next, quiet and close, ears slightly open but still. No calls were made, no sounds carried through the morning. They only came forward and gathered around her. She didn't vocalize, she didn't display. She walked into them the way rain enters dry earth, without force, only absorption. Her body disappeared into theirs as they pressed in, sides touching, trunks grazing gently against her neck, shoulder, and flank. One rubbed its head near her ribs. Another walked a slow circle around her and paused, shoulder to shoulder. There was no clear greeting, only presence, only return. Joel watched from below the ridge, one hand tightening unconsciously around the edge of his coat. He had no words to offer, not to them, not to her. The relief wasn't loud, it never had been, but it settled in the chest like a weight being lifted in silence. The herd did not stay long. Once she was enclosed, once the slow passes of contact had passed between them, they began to move. Together now. West, toward the trees that mark the edge of the deeper interior. She followed without hesitation, her limp pronounced but managed. No one fell behind. No one surged ahead. They moved in rhythm, a collective body stretching across the plain, fading step by step into the warming dust. By the time the sun reached the top of the ridge, only their tracks remained, lines in soft earth, curving out into the grass and disappearing where the land swallowed the light. And behind them, the basin held its breath, quiet, wide, and still.